Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our program tonight. And we are back in session. Hello, and welcome to Mom's Night In, the space where real life meets real faith. We are faith-filled moms, and I am your host, Tanya May Avett, and I am joined tonight, as always, by my faithful and lovely producer, Miss Markeisha Green. Hello, Miss Markeisha. How are you doing today?
Good.
Good.
I'm good.
It's good to see you. And if you are joining us, jump in the chat. Let us know where you are joining from. Just say hello. We would love to see who's on with us tonight. So as we start, this is our final Mom's Night In for season 4. I can't believe it. It's May. We typically end in May, and we usually have a continuous May specials, but we changed our format. So we have I think a wonderful guest who is going to she is the finale. It's the finale for season 4. Yes, it is going to be a finale indeed to remember. So we are we are so grateful to have her. But hello again, welcome. If you are joining us, jump on the chat, let us know who is on with us. We love to say hello. And so while you're joining, we want to just remind you of our website, faithfilledmoms.org, where you can find about 23, I want to say, different topics over the last 4 seasons of what we've done, including topics on loss, on divorce, on childhood illness, mom's conditions, blended family, infertility. We've done so much. So interestingly enough, I was on a site in a meeting today about our business, and the lady that was going through our website mentioned that she had 2 children with autism, and she saw our autism topic, and I said, yes, go ahead, go through. I told her, share it about the stories and all of the resources there. And that was really the point, right? That's really why we created this ministry, so that women and just anybody, but specifically we would say women and moms who can really relate to these topics. We want to share testimonies so that if you are where someone has been, you can see that God brought them out and he is faithful. He will bring you out as well. And just even through our journeys that we can give some encouragement, some inspiration. We always say on the show, you may not be going through the same exact thing that I'm going through, but you can absolutely use those lessons that I've learned in your own situation as well. Yep. So faithfulmoms.org, great resource. If you're talking to a friend and they're going through an issue, chances are we've gone through that topic. Send them to our website, give them some encouragement. Yes, it is there. It is there. So, and also what we really love about our website as well, we do have a section for resources, and we have mental health providers, all faith-based and believers. We promote mental health. We promote counseling. We promote therapy. Just like we want to be physically healthy, we want to be mentally healthy as well. So we promote that as well. So we do have a list of mental health providers that you can go and click on their links right from our website, make an appointment if you need to speak to someone. If you were considering getting counseling, it is a great resource. And one of our counselors, one of our therapists, Wanda Boyd, is having an upcoming event. So Markeisha, if you would share that flyer, she's having a 1-day peaceful pause on January the 14th. And I believe the deadline for the deposit has passed, but I'm sure if you reach out to her, hopefully they'll still.
It was the 15th of April.
Yeah, so I think so. And I know the final payment is due May 23rd. So maybe if the final payment is not due, you can reach out and see. But I did put my deposit down. I will be there. for my peaceful pause on June 14th, because I need to pause. I know I needed to pause. But as I shared, there's going to be a guided stillness practice. Some of us just need to be quiet, right? We just need to sit in nature and be quiet. Let our brains just stop moving and just decompress. So it's going to be an amazing morning and afternoon reflective conversation, mental health activity, and community building. So again, if you're interested, reach out. That information is also on our website. Her information is there. You can contact her and get more information as well. So I also want to share a little bit of sad news. We had one of our former Faithful Moms guests passed away since our last session or last conversation. So Mother Margaret Moses, who was on our Loss of a Spouse show, I want to say maybe 2 seasons ago.
Second season? I was going to say second season.
She passed away last month. So we had her funeral on Sunday, which was a lovely homegoing for her. And she was reunited with Bishop Moses, who she came to talk about the loss of her spouse. And she's just such a wonderful and wise woman. And we're going to just really miss her.
She had wrote a book.
She wrote a book about her husband. So her story is on our site as well.
Yeah.
Someone who's experienced the loss of a spouse, her story will live on. She will live on, on our but we just wanted to acknowledge her and just reflect on her passing. And I see Mercedes is on. She says she is here showing her full support. So Mercedes, thank you so much. It's so good. And I told Mercedes she's going to be a future guest on our show because she has a couple of testimonies, and we're going to get her on the show hopefully next season. We're going to get her
let's go
on here to join us.
I had testimonies I didn't even know I had.
Yes.
For this show.
Pulling out all kinds of stuff, right? We're going deep.
No problem.
Listen, there is healing in the building. There is healing in Moms Night In. Absolutely. So if you don't know who we are, Faithful Moms, we are a faith-based community that provides encouraging and safe space for complex topics, always wanting to share biblical and emotional support, hope, encouragement, and inspiration to women facing difficult seasons in life. So this is what we're going to do tonight. We have another powerful guest. Dr. Chantrise Holliman is joining us. And interestingly enough, I met I call her Dr. Chantrise sometimes, Soror Chantrise. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated as well.
Rated.
But we met her from another guest. If you remember, Amanda C. Clark, who was on our Congenital Conditions show, right? She had an online event where Dr. Chantrise was a speaker. When I tell you, she blew me away then, just powerful, powerful. And then earlier this year, Amanda had her in-person Beauty for Ashes workshop, and Dr. Chantrise came as her special keynote speaker. And when she came there, I said, we need you. We need you to come to the show. So God has ordered her steps finally. She is with Faith-Filled Moms. So Markeisha, I'm going to say goodbye to you. If you don't mind bringing our special guest in for this evening. Thank you so much, my friend. I'll see you soon.
I do not mind. Bye-bye.
All right, Dr. Chantrise is with
us.
Good evening, my friend and Soror. How you doing tonight?
I am well. How are you, my friend and Soror?
I'm excited. I'm telling you, from our first connection and reading your story, I'm like, I can't wait to have you on and to have this conversation. So welcome, welcome, welcome. As I said, I've heard you speak a couple times before. And again, that's why I think I'm so excited, because I know who you are. I know what you bring, and I know your story. And I'm just so excited for our guests to hear you, whether it's tonight, whether it's in the podcast or future, they're going to hear your story. So I'm just so grateful and thankful for you to be here. So I want to just give a few minutes for you to say hello to our guests. Just introduce yourself. Let them know who you are, where you are, what you do, and then we'll get right into your story.
Oh, wow. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Chantrise Holliman, but the only person who calls me by my full government name is my father, because she's just proud. Chantrise is fine. I am originally from Newton, Massachusetts. Fun fact, Fig Newtons are named after my hometown. But I have lived in Georgia for the past almost 30 years. Spent about 27 of those years in Atlanta. My husband and I moved to Savannah, Georgia 2 years ago. So down here, loving the weather. Much nicer than being in Massachusetts at this time of year. I am currently my full-time job is I am a communication specialist for contractor for the CDC. So I am the person who helps to craft emails and all these things that go out, although not a whole lot is going out from the CDC right now, but that's a different story for a different day.
We're not here for that tonight. Yep, we're not here for that tonight.
Outside of work, I am a pastor's wife, so I am a
Mm-hmm.
first lady.
Mm-hmm.
I also am an author, so I've self-published a couple of books.
We're gonna talk
Um, I,
about them
al-
in a bit too.
I
Yep.
also
Mm-hmm.
have a brand new ministry that God uh, ordained that I begin, which I think we'll talk about a little bit too. I'm also a yaya of two and the mom and bonus mom of three. Oh, I'm also the grandparent of two pets that my daughter owns. So I'm a
Mm-hmm.
grandparent pet. I don't
Mm-hmm.
a grand pet parent. I don't know
And
how that
you
works.
babysit those them too, right?
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
the dog and the
Mm-hmm.
cat.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's the Reader's Digest version of
Love it, love it, love it. And one of the things I saw, you are obviously a speaker, a motivational speaker,
I
and
am.
you will be speaking to us tonight. You will be encouraging, part encouragement, part therapy, part preaching, part all of that. We're gonna get all
We're gonna
of
put it
that
together.
tonight.
That's what we're gonna do.
Absolutely. So I want to jump right into your story because I
Mhm.
want to make sure we have enough time to get through everything. So talk to us, tell us about March 2018 was the day that really your entire life changed. It changed everything for you. So talk to us about that occurrence, that experience, and kind of lead us into our topic for tonight.
Right. So March 23rd, 2018. Was well, March 22nd, we'll start there.
Mhm.
I went to bed that night, had a book on my nightstand. I remember I was excited I was going to read it, even made a post about it. It was like, I'm going to read this book tomorrow. Woke up on March 23rd because I was having chest pains. I thought that it was gas because the day before I'd had a cheesesteak, which I knew I did not need, but I had a craving. So I ate a cheesesteak the day before. So when I woke up on the 23rd, I just said, this is the cheesesteak coming back to haunt me. No more cheesesteak, Chantrise. So I was having what I thought was heartburn.
Mhm.
And I went to go downstairs and purchase, I'm not purchase, but to pick up a Red Rock ginger ale, which is this very strong ginger ale. Whenever I had a stomach ache, that's what I would go drink. I walked to the stairs and stopped and became violently ill and had to run to the bathroom and I
Mm.
threw up. Realized that the chest pains weren't really going anywhere. I was trying to stretch, like, okay, maybe if it's a gas bubble. Got back in the bed and just kind of laid there. Text a friend of mine and said, hey, I'm going to be late for work today, but I'm coming. My husband, God bless him, looked at me and said, are you feeling okay? And I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to lay here for a minute. I'll be fine. I've got too much to do at work.
Mhm.
About 5 minutes later, he came back. He went to the bathroom. He came back and looked at me and he said, do I need to call an ambulance? Which I thought was a strange question when I said, you know, I'm I'm fine,
I'm fine. Mhm.
but God knew, right? So he called. I said yes. In my mind, I'm thinking no because this is no big deal. This is
Right.
gas. I'm fine. But yes is what came out of my mouth, and it's that yes that saved my life. So my
Wow.
husband called the paramedics. Ambulance shows up. What's going on? He's like, my wife is having chest pains. Ma'am, are you having chest pains? I'm like, yeah, but I'm sure it's gas. No big deal. Like, just give me something because I stuff I have to do. She said, okay, well, let me just check your blood pressure and see what's going on. And she took my blood pressure and immediately stopped talking to me and started talking to my husband and said, well, sir, where would you like for us to take her? And I said, excuse me.
I'm right
Hi,
here.
yeah, I'm still here.
Uh-huh.
What do you mean take me? She said, well, ma'am, you're having a heart attack. Oh, hmm. Well, then we should probably go someplace soon. And to know me is to understand that I have this very odd sense of humor.
Mhm.
So I didn't really think, I mean, it was pressure, but it wasn't pain, right? So
Okay.
I didn't, people have heart attacks all the time. I'm like, okay, they're going to give me something. I'm going to go to the hospital. I'll be home by
Mhm.
whatever. And my husband said, well, take her to this hospital. And I knew that it was serious when the paramedic said, if we take her to that hospital, she won't make it.
Wow.
And I said,
Wow.
well, what do you mean I won't make it? Well, let's just, well, what's the closest hospital? Can we go there? Let's go there. And I remember seeing my husband standing outside by his car looking very confused and disheveled. I remember getting in the ambulance. them giving me a nitroglycerin pill to put underneath my tongue.
Mm-hmm.
I remember feeling the ambulance. I remember getting to the hospital, them rushing me into the ER. I remember seeing my husband outside the emergency room doors and hearing the nurse say, her husband is standing outside. And that's the last thing I remember. And it turns out that I was having a widowmaker heart attack, and my heart kept stopping. The main artery in my heart was 100% blocked,
Mm.
which was why I was having the heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out later that my heart stopped 9 times. Every time they would get my heart back beating, it would stop again, and they would have to pull out the AED paddles, and they kept increasing the voltage, trying to keep me alive. And one of the times, my husband told me later that my heart stopped. They were moving me through the sort of like to the ambulance, and it stopped. My heart stopped right in front of him. They had to stop,
Mm.
get the AED paddles while he's standing there looking at me, and give me the
Shock
the
you. Yeah.
the shock me, and then move me on. I was in a coma for a week. And when I awoke from my coma, the first thing that I realized was that I could not move my legs. And my husband asked me, he said, "Well, do you know what happened?" I said, "Well, did I have a stroke? Because I can't move my
I
legs." He
can't
said, "No."
move. Mm-hmm.
He said, "No, you had a heart attack." And I was like, "Well, why can't I move my legs?" And he's like, "Well, now that I don't know." Um, when I stayed in the ICU for a week, I actually was moved to a regular room, well, a room on the cardiac unit on Easter.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband's Resurrection Day sermon was about Jesus, and it was about me.
Wow. Wow.
I got up to the room, and I was still very much drugged. They had me on 7 or 8 different types of drugs. I found out later that they were trying all of the things that should have worked in order to revive me, in order to bring me back, and nothing was working. So whatever they normally use to help people with heart attacks, none of that was working. And
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
reason we discovered is because I also live with an autoimmune disease called lupus. And if you know anything about lupus, then you know that your immune system is backwards. So instead of your immune system protects you from things that are supposed to do you harm.
Mm-hmm.
When you live with lupus, your immune system thinks that you are the virus. It thinks that you are the thing that is
Dangerous,
that,
right?
right,
Yeah.
dangerous. And so all of the medicine my body kept rejecting.
Wow.
My immune system kept rejecting, and so it was a whole. It was really life or death. The physicians told my husband. That's happened on a Friday. Told my husband Saturday morning, you need to call her parents. You need to call whoever and get her affairs in order because she's not going to make it through the weekend.
Mm.
And there's a whole lot more to that sort of what happened in the midst of me being in a coma and them telling my family and my daughter and my parents all of these things. But when I got to the cardiac room, I was there for about maybe 3 or 4 days, and the damage to my physical body was
Mhm,
extensive
mhm.
because of the amount of electricity they had to pump through my body.
Mm.
I had second and third degree burns on my lower extremities, on my thighs, on my legs, on my knees, on
Visible on the outside.
visible on the outside. Like there were patches of skin
Wow,
that were missing
wow.
because of the amount of electricity it was burning. It was burning my skin. And so I was swollen from the medication. I was retaining fluid, and they I remember looking at my feet, and my feet were the color of this sweatshirt
Mm,
because of the medication, because the lack of blood flow. I also live with another autoimmune disease called Raynaud's syndrome, which reduces blood flow to my extremities. So there was a whole lot
mhm,
going
mhm.
on in my body. And I remember looking at my feet, and my feet were the color of this hoodie, and my red toenails because I had just gotten my pedicure. And
And just
oh,
to say, as we have some people that'll be on the podcast, your shirt is black for people who cannot see. Her
oh,
shirt is
thank you.
yes.
I'm sorry. Right,
No,
right.
you're fine.
My shirt is black, and so my feet were jet black.
Mhm.
And I had these bright red toes because they were Delta red, of course. And I remember looking at my feet, wondering why they looked like that. Um, One day, the nurses came in and they were um, removing and replacing the dressings on my leg because they were trying to get the swelling down. They were trying to protect the wounds, and they unwrapped the dressing, and my right leg opened up like a sandwich.
Mm.
So the left side of my right leg fell open and just fell off.
Wow.
And the nurse looked, and her eyes got wide, and I looked and I said, I don't think that's supposed to happen, right? And she looked at me and she ran out the room, went and got one of the physicians, and the doctor came in to the room and saw my leg, and his response was, and I looked at him. I said, "Now, sir, that is not supposed to be your response. You are the doctor.
And you
You're
said it
supposed
just
to know
like
what."
that. Just like that.
I said it just like that. I said, "You're supposed to be telling me what's going on." And to make a very long story very short, it turned out that I had a severe and raging infection, but
Mm.
it wasn't an infection that they could pinpoint. So they were just kind of throwing antibiotics at me because nothing was working.
Mhm.
And eventually they said, okay, the only way that we're going to be able to stop this infection is we're going to have to amputate your right leg below the knee. And for somebody who was a runner, who had a closet full of shoes, who uh, went to DSW weekly to purchase shoes, this was not something that I wanted to hear, but it was to save my life.
Mhm.
So they amputated all the toes on my left foot because there was an infection there. They amputated my right leg up below the knee, and then we went back to the room. And 2 days later, they said the infection is still spreading. We now have to re-amputate,
Mm.
and now we're going to amputate what's left of your leg on the
Mm.
right side above the knee. So within a week and a half, I had 3 different amputations. No one could explain to me why I was paralyzed. They gave me a whole bunch of reasons that even in my drug-induced stupor didn't make sense. They said, "Well, you've been laying still for an hour. I mean, for a week or so it's just atrophy is set in." And I'm counting. I was like, "How long was I in a coma?" They were like 7 days. Atrophy doesn't set in after 7
Mhm.
days.
Mhm.
Something else is going on.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until literally months and months later that I found out that the reason why I was partially paralyzed was because I had a spinal cord injury, and it was my mother who remembered that when I was in ICU, I started bleeding out, and they couldn't figure out why. And apparently, I was bleeding from my spine, and I almost not. It wasn't the heart attack that actually almost killed me; it was the blood loss.
Mm.
And my mother told me that the doctor came in, cardiologist came in and did something, was able to stop the blood, but I'd lost enough blood to my spine that it caused a spinal cord injury.
Mhm.
And that's why I was paralyzed. And all of that happened between March 23rd and about May 5th, about May 5th. And spent 60 days in the hospital, additional 21 days in rehab. Then I had to spend another 3 weeks a couple of months later because then another infection set in. And then my final week in the hospital was um, a final amputation. So, yes.
I'm going to put this picture up of you, and it's on our flyer as well, but I wanted to share this picture. And as I ask my next question, right?
Hmm.
So you go from, like you said, you have, I can see you have fabulous legs. You
Hmm.
have fabulous shoes. You know what I mean? You have, you said a
Uh-huh.
closet full of shoes.
Uh-huh.
So going from the person, as I'm looking at the person on the left,
Right.
to now having both of your legs amputated,
Hmm.
and as you share in your story, totally dependent on others for
Hmm.
assistance, right? So talk about the transition from being the strong, confident, beautiful, independent woman until to someone who literally you are dependent for almost everything that you need. And in this, we want to talk about us as women, how it's very hard for us to ask for help. It's
Right.
very hard for us to accept help. And so talk about that transition of how you were in the position that you had to be able to accept help, and what was like that mentally, emotionally, what was all that you went through with that?
Well, so we're just going to be real
Yes,
transparent and say
yes,
that
ma'am.
it was ugly.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing pretty about that transition. I was angry. Foremost, I was angry at God. That's a whole, we'll talk a little bit about that. But I was angry because I'm the helper. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
one that does for all these people. And I've always been an independent soul. I'm an only child. And so I grew up, not really having any, I mean, I had my parents, but I grew up understanding that if anything was going to get done, it was going to be me to do it. So that's the way that I postured my life, that, I can do all things and I'm going to do
Period.
all things,
Mm-hmm.
period. So when it occurred to me and that reality set in that um, I couldn't even sit up by myself without falling over, I was so weak. I couldn't roll over. I couldn't use the bathroom. I couldn't bathe. There were all these things that I couldn't do. And I remember fighting the nurses, like physically fighting. They were like, "We got it." And I'm doing this and I'm saying some words that aren't at the least bit holy.
Uh-huh.
um, um, and it was really, really difficult. It, my mother jokes and said that we just knew that, you became disabled. They're like, okay, so finally she's going to accept the help.
Mm.
I got about 10 times worse. I got
Wow.
even more um, independent. I did not want the help. It didn't matter if it meant that I wasn't going to brush my teeth, if it meant I wasn't going to bathe, then that was fine because you're not going to help me do these things because I'm
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be able to do them myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that as women, um, as Black women especially, there is this trope that has just kind of existed throughout history that um, we are strong, that we don't need assistance, that we have it all together. And if we think about history, it's the reason why we are kind of juxtaposed with white women. During the times of slavery, if we're talking about sort of racial injustice, white women were to be protected, right? They were very fragile, they were very feminine, be protected. We worked in the fields, we were the beasts of burden.
Mm-hmm.
So when you take that visual and you place it on our shoulders, we've been carrying that since since our ancestors were brought over on slave ships. And there's a book, and I'm hoping I get this right. It's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Mm-hmm. The
And it
body keeps
talks
score.
The body
Mm-hmm.
keeps score, and it
Mm-hmm.
talks about how this generational trauma is sort of embedded in our DNA. Like, for example, real quick, um, my grandmother was terrified of swimming. She never learned how to swim, but she was never around water. So how are you terrified of water and swimming if you've never been around water? The research goes that the trauma from our ancestors generations ago coming over on the slave ships and the water and the movement of the ships and all that became it shifted and changed our DNA.
Mm.
Um, there are people who are afraid of dogs, but have never seen a dog, never been around a dog. Again, that kind of generational trauma. I know we're talking about my book later, but I want to share this book, and it's called Too Heavy a Yoke, Black Women and the Burden of Strength, and it's by Dr. Shaniqua Walker Barnes, who's actually was my professor in seminary. And there's a quote, and it's funny because I had this book on my desk today thinking about something else, and you asked the
Mm.
question, and I was like, oh, wait.
Right. Uh-huh.
And there's a quote that says, As Bishop Teresa Snorton notes, the church explicitly reinforces these beliefs. The strong Black woman is often viewed as already having great spiritual strength and access to the spiritual resources for her own healing. She has many problems. However, traditions of faith and culture have taught her that her only recourse in this life is to look Godward. So, part of the reason I believe that it is so difficult for Black women, especially Black women raised in the church, to accept help is because the only help that we are supposed to receive is from God.
Comes from above.
And that's it. So, yeah.
And with that, I love the analogy. I don't know if you've heard it. I've heard it in many messages where it's a story of someone's drowning. Someone comes by on a rowboat. Then someone comes by in a speedboat. And so this help comes, the person drowns, gets to heaven and says, God, I believe that you were going to help me. I let, all this help go because I knew you would save me. And he said, I sent you the rowboat.
I sent you the helicopter. I sent you all these things. Yep. Yeah, so I think that that's part of the reason why. And also because when we ask for help, it forces us to be vulnerable. And in a society that it feels like we're always under attack, asking for help means that we are in a position of being
weak
injured
or
and
weak,
being
right?
weak and being taken advantage of, and we can't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being strong all the time is almost a way of protection.
Wow.
Even if
at our
it's killing us.
At our own detriment.
That's it.
At our own detriment.
That's it.
So I want to jump upon something you said as well. With this, we're having, and we talked about it earlier even in the show, we say some of these, regardless if someone went through what you've gone through, these life lessons are transferable. And so everyone listening has had a life-altering experience, an experience that there was life before this thing happened, and now there's life after it, right? Whether it's divorce, whether it's death, it's a major illness, accident, loss, we've had, if you're living, you've had a life-altering experience.
Right.
But I want to talk about the moment when you're in this again, and you need help. You are in a vulnerable moment, and the nurse said something that affirmed you in this low point. I wanted you to share part of that story with our guest of what she said and really what that meant and how those words are so important, regardless of what the life-altering experience may be.
Right. Shout out. It is Nurses Appreciation Week. Shout out to all the nurses out there.
Let's do that. Yes, thank you. We appreciate
because my nurses were godsends, and hindsight being 2020, I realized that God was in the midst of all of this because God is the one who put these particular nurses, like of all the nurses that could have been in this experience, I had all the ones who were just saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Ghost. But this one particular nurse, and she told me, and it was a day when I was just frustrated and I was crying and I was, life was over. And she asked me why I was crying. And I said, because I feel like a burden. And she said, you are not a burden. You are still you, and you are still worth fighting for.
So powerful. So powerful.
And I remember, kind of stopping crying and looking at her and just kind of blinking like, huh? And she, she actually prayed with me, and then she went off to do whatever. And I remember sitting in the hospital bed in the room, and it was quiet. I'm still worth fighting for. I don't know if I believe that, but she said I was still worth fighting for.
Still, after whatever that life-altering experience, you were still worth
fighting for. And I think the key word in all of that is worth. That worthy. That when you're in the midst of a situation like this, it's very difficult to see yourself as worthy of anything good, of worthy of any blessings, because you're so mired down in the midst of this trauma that you can't see your way clear. But when she said you are still.
See, that's what me. That's that word still. Right. I'm stuck on that as no matter what it is, no matter what you experience, no matter what anyone has said about you, no matter even how you feel, no matter what shame you may be carrying, you are still.
Still. Yep. The same way you were before.
Nothing's
It's the
changed.
same way.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed. And it's funny because we're actually still very good friends um, outside of all this, and that's been 7 years. But I think that the important part of that is just understanding your value.
Yeah.
You were valuable before A happened. You're valuable after A happened.
And you are loved. And you are valuable and you are loved.
And you are loved. And if you're thinking, well, no, I don't have anybody who loves me, God loves you.
Okay. And that's all. That's enough.
God loves you.
And that's enough.
Yeah.
And that's enough. I want to pull some life lessons that I was taking notes. I told you before I was taking notes out. So I just wanted to pull them. I want to share them with our guests. I don't want to just save this just for me. I want to share it with them. So the one I took out when I was reading your story, you talked about your prosthetics and learning how to use them. And in that, how you got through that was just learning to take one step forward. And as we're talking about this, again, you are still worth fighting for. So, okay, I have that in my head now. So I'm worth fighting for. So what now? And so that's my next step. My next path is just take that one step and figure out, what is that one step? Is that getting out of bed? Is that just taking a shower? Is that just putting some clothes on? Is it calling a therapist for an appointment? Is it listening? Whatever that one step is individually for you, take that one next step. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So my first step, that one next step, once I got home and realized that I was now living in a house that was not at all suited for me, the depression just like sat on me. It was like the heaviest weighted blanket ever. I didn't want to bathe. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't brush my teeth. I wouldn't change my clothes. I had decided in my head that I was just going to waste away. And my our oldest daughter was home, had come home from school. And I remember she looked at me and she was like, "Mommy, you need to eat something." And I said, "I'm not hungry." And she looked at me and she brought me the food and she stood in front of me and she said, "Eat." And I looked at her, I was like, "I
That's
beg
your
your
child.
pardon.
That's your child, right?
I am still your mother." And I said, "I am still your mother." She said, "Well, you sure aren't acting like it." Wait a minute. Who are you talking to? And she walked away. And I was like,
wow.
And I sat there and I think it was like a piece of toast or something. I was like, I'm still the mama. And so I ate the toast. That was my first step. And it was my daughter who forced me into it by being everything that I taught her to be. Right.
That strong woman, right?
That strong woman. She was
Yes.
just like, "Yeah, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. You're going to eat." And then the next day, she came downstairs and she said, "Would you like something to eat for breakfast?" And she just kind of looked at me and blinked multiple times.
Look, head tilted to the side a bit. Look.
Yeah, I was like, yes, I would. She's like, "Okay, great." I ate, and then she's like, "Okay, now, Mommy, you have to brush your teeth." So sometimes that your next step isn't something that you can decide on your own.
We may need help with that.
You may need help.
Wow.
You may need somebody, one, who ain't scared of you. And two, who again understands that you are still worth fighting for.
Yes.
To fight on your behalf until you get enough strength for yourself.
To fight yourself. Yes.
Fight for yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to pull out, a life lesson that I had wrote down for myself, because I'm telling you, this was to me. I'm glad I can share with everyone else now, but this story, these things were for me. So the next lesson that I took away was learning how to rely and lean on God's strength. For some reason, we're stuck on this strength and this strong Black woman, but leaning on God's strength instead of our strength. And I often think about any Avenger fans out there. There's one of, I think the first Avengers where Hulk told Loki, he called him, "You're a puny god." And I think of that, like our
Right, and
puny strength, right? It's
and
like
he takes
we,
him in. Yes.
yes, and just right into the ground. But we think we're so strong. And if we think about the strength that we have compared to the power of God, it's puny, it's nothing. So
Yeah.
why do we keep trying to rely on this puny strength of ours instead of the Almighty who can take this from us with nothing, like as nothing, and handle it?
Because we're arrogant.
Mhm.
We're arrogant, and
Yeah.
we also live in a society that essentially ingrains in us that the way you are successful is by what? You pull yourself up by your own
Tie your
bootstraps. You like
bootstraps.
how
Yeah.
how often have we heard that?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
especially in American culture, that you are considered weak if you don't figure it out. Right. You have to you can't rely on anybody else. You got to rely on your own strength. But now, and I have to kind of laugh at myself because I was like, Chantrice, you sounded real dumb. Um, but if you think about it, God made us out of dirt.
Mhm.
Okay?
Mhm.
God made us out of dust. There's the thing that they say at funerals, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Where if you think about what dust has no substance. Dust is not strong. You can't do anything with dust, right? Um, but if you take dust, if you take dirt, if you take clay and you add water to it,
Mm.
and you add to it to give it some substance, then it can be molded and it can be made into something useful. God is that added substance. God is the thing that we need to be strong, right? God knows that we are not strong by ourselves. And I
Mm.
believe that God made us that way so that we would
Mhm.
be dependent, but then again,
Mhm.
we got the big head, right? So we
We ate the fruit.
we ate
We
the
ate the
fruit and we're
fruit.
just like,
Mhm.
we got
Mhm.
this. I
Mhm.
don't need. I got no. Um,
Yeah.
I think the first time that I realized that it was going to take more than just my own inner strength. Once I found my strength,
Mhm.
I mentioned earlier that I couldn't roll over because of the paralysis. I didn't have the trunk control or support to roll over, and I would just get frustrated because I was a stomach sleeper, and so
Mm.
if I needed to roll over to my side, someone had to literally move
Roll
me
you
over to my
over.
side.
Mhm.
And I remember laying on my sofa, and I was like, God, I really want to sleep on my stomach, but I can't turn over by myself. Would you help me turn over so I can sleep on my stomach?
Wow.
And God did. It was a struggle, but I was able to turn over and lay on my stomach. And I laid on my stomach. I took a deep breath, and I bust out crying because not only was I sleeping in a position that I hadn't been able to sleep in since before my heart attack, but I had asked God for help,
Mm.
and He delivered. And that to me was a sign, you're still here.
Yeah.
You haven't forgotten about me.
Mhm.
And when I was in the midst of the hospital, I remember praying, and God was silent. My husband was praying, and God was silent. And I just knew that God had, for whatever reason, had abandoned me. And I had convinced myself to a degree that God was no longer real.
Wow.
God couldn't be real
Mhm.
because this wouldn't have happened to me
This would not have happened if he was.
if
Right.
God was real.
Right.
But
And he
the
loved me. And if he loved me, he would
and if He
never
loved
let
me,
this
so He
happen
doesn't
to
love
me.
me,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
He's not real.
Mhm.
He's abandoned me. But the is it the Proverbs that says, "Train up a child in the way that she will go, and when she is old, she won't depart
Won't
from it."
depart from it.
My
Mhm.
grandmother was the one who instilled all of these seeds in me. And as much as angry as I was at God, as much as I refused to believe that He was real, there's this little mustard seed of faith
Wow.
that just said, but maybe,
Mm.
but maybe. And when I was able to roll over, it was like confirmation, like, okay,
Wow.
but
Wow.
maybe. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. My final lesson that I want to talk about before we move into your book and your
Mhm.
ministry was this part of your story sharing about deciding whether you wanted to use your wheelchair or prosthetics, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you talked about releasing what does not work for me.
Mhm.
And I think that's so powerful because many times we have an idea in our mind, I should be doing this or I should be doing
Yeah.
that. And we get frustrated because whatever we feel like we should be doing is not working. And so, talk now about identifying, understanding, and releasing things that do not work for you while you're on your journey of healing, while you're on the other side, and while you may have things set of what you should be doing, how to release what is not working for you.
So again, that was not particularly pretty either,
Mm-hmm.
um, because like you said, that there are times when we think in our head, we have this ultimate, vision. This is how it's supposed to be. And when I became an amputee, all I could think about was being able to stand and walk again. Like that was my
Mm-hmm.
focus. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
get prosthetics. I'm gonna walk. I may not be able to wear my heels anymore, but I'm gonna have these cute shoes, and I'm looking at prosthetic covers and things I can do to decorate my legs and all of that. So when I got my prosthetic legs, um, because of the paralysis, they weren't your traditional prosthetic legs. They had to be built up to accommodate the fact that I had very little trunk control so that it could help stabilize me, which meant that they were 2 or 3 times heavier than a traditional prosthetics would be. So that in itself meant walking and moving was going to be more challenging. Um, but they are also uncomfortable, and I liken them to an ill-fitting pair of shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they were made for me, I also live with neuropathy in my residual limbs. So if you've ever had your foot fall asleep, that's that sort of temporary pins and needles feeling. That's the way
Mm-hmm.
my legs feel all the time.
Wow.
So when you have that feeling and you're putting them into this apparatus and then you're trying to move with them, it 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 becomes even more painful. But because I wanted to have I wanted to stand up again. I wanted to have that idealized view of myself, standing up straight, all 4 foot 11 and a half of me. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to see. But my body was steadily telling me, this does not feel good.
Mm-mm.
I do not like this.
Mm-mm.
And um, I was just like, but life with prosthetics is going to be easier than life in a wheelchair. Because with prosthetics, at least I can step over things, I can climb up stairs. And my body was just like, no,
Mm-mm.
no,
Mm-mm.
this is not working. Um, my back, I was having severe back pain because again, I have very little trunk control. So I couldn't stand up um, straight because my abdominal muscles are very, very weak, and in some places they don't work at all. So I was using my back slowly to maintain my posture. It wasn't working. And I finally, sitting in the car after a really exhausting session, and just like, it's about quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
I know the appearance that I want to have,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but what kind of life am I going to have trying to maneuver with these extra heavy legs? And I couldn't be really independent in them. I couldn't really, you know, get in and out of the car because you had to lift and move, and it was just a lot. And I just said, okay,
Is that appearance worth the cost?
is that a parent? And I made the decision, and I was like, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's not. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember telling Bethany, who was my physical therapist, I was like, yeah, I'm done. And
Mm-hmm.
she didn't seem the least bit surprised by it. She's like, okay. She's like, because you have to do what is best for you. And I literally have not. Now, every so often, I'll put my prosthetic legs on just to see if I can, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I could,
Mm-hmm.
can I, you know, can I move in them a little bit? But for every day, they are literally in a closet, and
Mm-hmm.
they're
Mm-hmm.
literally in the closet in a corner. I haven't put them on in years because my quality of life is better.
Yeah.
I drive a car, which fascinates people, and I love when people come up and ask me, how are you doing that? But in my wheelchair, I have a very nice sort of collapsible wheelchair that weighs like 5 pounds. So if I need to get someplace, I can get into my car, break my wheelchair apart, throw stuff in the back seat, and go. As
Mm-hmm.
opposed to with uh with my prosthetic legs and having to lift them and figure out and how to adjust
Maneuver.
and all and
Mm-hmm.
maneuver. Yeah, life is so much easier
Wow.
in with my wheelchair. And so
But
her
making that
name,
decision of what works for
yes,
you.
and her name is Ruby because what color is she?
Oh,
Red,
red, of course.
of course.
Of course.
But yeah, but making that decision
Yes.
impacted my life, and I will say that I am living a far better,
And fuller.
fuller life in
Yes.
my wheelchair
Yes.
than I would have had I tried to fit into the societal
Mm-hmm.
picture of what
Mm-hmm.
it is
And
that I should
molds
look
of
like
what you
and
should have
molds.
done and
Yeah,
looked like and all that.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
powerful, powerful. So Markeisha, I'm going to ask you to put Mercedes' comment up. I just saw it there, but I want to share it particularly. And if Mercedes, I hope that you don't mind me kind of sharing your story as well. But Mercedes is someone who I shared at the beginning of the show. I want to bring her on. She is a child of parents with addiction, right?
Mm,
And so her grandmother raised her, and her grandmother just passed away. And so that's what I
mm,
said about this show, that even though we talk about different topics, the lessons there are transferable for whatever those specific situations that we're experiencing. And she
yeah.
said, I want to thank you for your transparency. Grief hit me so hard today and took every bit of my strength just to get through the day. And sitting at her desk, she's got a reminder about this meeting and to support us. So she's here boohooing, crying. It's okay. You can cry and then get yourself together
Hmm.
and wipe it off. You're gonna be beautiful after this. But she was just saying this has been the best part of her day. Who knew? That's my prayer, right? That's always been my prayer.
Yeah,
But who knew? Regardless of what that situation is, we just pray that as we have these conversations, that it definitely touches someone and minister to them for whatever the situation that they're going through.
yeah,
God is
yeah.
telling me that I'm only tired because I'm trying to do it without him. Yes, you are a puny God. So please,
Right.
please let the big God
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Thank you, Markeisha. But thank you for that. We have about 8 minutes left. So I do want to get to your book as well. So Markeisha, put a picture of Dr. Chantrice's book up. I want to ask you about your book. I want to ask you about your ministry. I want to ask you about what God is allowing you to do now
Oh,
through this experience. And I've been saying again for y'all listening, these life lessons, get the book so you can get whatever revelation that you may need. Though I just wanted to share some of my revelations tonight, but talk about this book, talk about your ministry, talk about what you're doing now.
so Shoes with App Feet came about a year after my heart attack, and I was sort of still in the very early days of recovery. And people around me kept asking, "When you need to write a book?" And I'm thinking, I'm not writing a book. I refuse, because I'm trying to forget the past year of my life, and you all want me to like retell it. And people kept saying, "Write a book, write a book, write a book," and I just kept saying no. And then, because this is the way God deals with me at like 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard God very clearly, "Write the book."
Mm.
And I was like, "No, I'm not, God, I'm not writing this book." And God has a way of being very forceful, but also very gracious and kind and graceful with me. And God just kept bringing it back and bringing it back. And finally, like, having a temper tantrum, like, fine, I'll write the book, but I'm not going to enjoy it and I'm not going to like it. And
Mhm.
literally, when you read my book, the very first thing it says on the very first page is, "I don't want to do this." That's
This is protest. I'm writing
yeah.
this in
I'm
protest.
writing this book in protest. But then God shared something really important with me, and God said, "Do you know why I'm having you write this book?" And I was just like, "Because you want to get on my nerves." And I don't know
Mm.
how you talk to God, but that's the way I talk
Mm.
to God. And God said, "Because do you remember when you were a teacher and you would tell your students that anything that they go through is almost never for them solely. It's always for someone they haven't met yet. And God said, the reason why you are writing this book is because there are peoples whose destinies I have connected to them reading this book. If you
Wow.
don't write this book,
Wow.
then their destinies will never be fulfilled and it will be your fault.
Wow.
And that's not really what you want to hear God say. So I got to writing. And it's called Shoes Without Feet. Shoes is an acronym for strength, hope, obstacles, encouragement, and success. And the testimony behind the book cover is that I was looking for someone who could create the cover for my book, and one of my friends gave me the name of an artist by the name of Benford Dwight Stellmacher Jr., who was a very large black man. And I told him, I said, "You do not look like your name should be Benford Dwight Stellmacher Jr." And I said, "I need a cover for my book." And he said, "Do you want to tell me what you want, or do you want me to let God tell me what you want?"
Ooh.
And I said, I'm gonna let God tell you what I need. 24 hours later, he sent me that cover.
Wow.
And I nearly passed out. I said, I know that you were talking to God, because there's no way that you could know about the red low top chucks.
That's right. So that wasn't you. That wasn't you with the red. Oh my goodness.
So when I was a
Oh my
teacher,
goodness.
I was known as the teacher with the red low top chucks. I had multiple pairs. That was my shoe of choice when I was teaching. I taught high school. So for you to put that in the picture, I said, I know you had to have heard from God. And he said,
Yes.
he calls him Jehovah Sneaky. He's like, yeah, Jehovah Sneaky told me.
And so for those that may have joined late, Chantrise and I are members of the segment. I put my red and white on tonight in honor of you. But so that is a shoe that we typically wear to different events. We will put on the red chucks and go out. So I just assumed that was something you had chosen.
No, he went into prayer, and that's what God gave him. And when I showed it to people that I used to work with, they're like, "Oh, you put your red chucks on there." I said, "Yeah, but I didn't tell him to do that." They're like, they're like, "Beg pardon?" I said, God told them. They were like, "Whoa."
That's mind-blowing.
So, yeah, so the book is essentially a retelling of what happened in my life from March 23rd all the way up until I stopped writing the book. It's part Bible study, it's part humor, and like I said, I have this very interesting sense of humor. So there's lots of places inside the book where I expect you to laugh, because I wrote them for you to laugh. And then there are, at the end of each chapter, there is a fictional retelling of a woman's story from the Bible that is connected to the theme. So the story for strength is the story of Rizpah, and Rizpah um, was Saul's concubine, and her sons were murdered um, as out of revenge before something that Saul had done. And because Saul was dead and the people couldn't get revenge, they murdered her sons. And she ends up sitting by their bodies and sort of making sure that nobody bothers them, that the birds don't feed on them. And then David finally blesses her and he gives them a proper burial. And so I take her story and I drop it in 2019, 2020. What would that look like in this modern era? And then there are 4 other stories. Mary Magdalene is in there. The daughters of Zelophehad are in there. The widow who had the last little bit of oil and flour. All of those I've taken and reimagined them as modern stories. And so that's in there as well. And then ministry, 'cause I know we're running out of time. At the beginning of last year, God spoke to me and told me that I needed to start a ministry. And I'm just like, yes, God, in all of my free time, what are you talking about? And the name of my ministry is Living a Resurrected Life. And that actually came to me from somebody who actually heard my story. And she said, I just keep hearing God say that you are living a literal resurrected life. your life has been resurrected. Physically, you died. Your heart kept stopping. The doctor said that you're not going to be here. You went up to your hospital room on Resurrection Sunday. And so living a resurrected life is really a ministry, what I tell people, for women like me. So Gen X women who are supposed to be in this ideal part of their life, and then a curveball is
Something
thrown.
happens.
Something
Right.
happens,
Something happens.
and they have to rebuild or build again. Not sorry, rebuild or build for the first time. Because as women, a lot of times we put everybody before us, and then when something happens to sort of shake the table, we don't remember who we are, or we realize that we never knew who we were or who God called us to be. And it took this situation for us to really, for God to get us in a position where God could give us what it is that we need to become who we were called to be, but that we let life kind of push to the side. And so living a resurrected life really is a space for us, for women, to discover or rediscover who it is that God has called us to be.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I just saw Leslie said she got the book already.
Yay!
That's so Leslie Shaw. She said, I got the book. She just purchased the book. But to stay connected to Dr. Chantrise, Facebook, Instagram is Dr. Chantrise. We have the website up there, Markeisha. One more time, put the website, drchantrise.com. And then the website for her books is up there. Yes.
Can I share one more thing? And your listeners and everybody, that you'll be like among the first people to know this. The other thing that God charged me with at the beginning of this year is that and you won't be in town, you will be someplace else.
Yes.
I will be having my very first ever women's conference on November 8th. If you follow me on Instagram or on Facebook, you'll be able to get the details.
And we will send it out. Yes. Send me the information too, and we will get it out to our followers.
And it will be November 8th, and it will be in Pooler, Georgia. And you're probably thinking, where is Pooler? Pooler is 10 minutes outside of Savannah, Georgia. And the benefit of coming to Pooler is that there's a huge outlet mall right next door to the hotel where we're having it.
That's a selling point right there.
Selling point. And it's called the Flourishing in Faith Women's Conference. And I am super excited about it. I'm also very nervous. So I'm soliciting all of the prayers.
Yes.
Because this is a big one for me.
Yeah. We will put it on our website. We will get the flyer. We will get all the information. We will share it. Thank you, my sister, my soror, my friend.
You are so
Thank
welcome.
You so much. Thank you to all that joined us as well. I hope that you've been blessed by this. We will make sure Dr. Chantrise's information is on our website, on our resource page as well. So thank you all. God bless you and good night.